Today, on Brasher Warning.
The pilot chose to rely on a manual fuel check, and get this, he used an uncalibrated wooden stick.
Wait, hold on. A wooden stick?
Yeah, a wooden stick. You know, like something you might use to stir paint.
You're kidding.
Welcome to Brasher Warning, the podcast that dives deep into aviation incidents with sharp analysis, insightful discussions, and just a touch of edge. If you're passionate about aviation and love a good post-incident breakdown, you're in the right place. Before we take off, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share with your crew. Let's get into it.
Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. This time, we're going to be looking at how even with all the advancements in technology we have in aviation, things can still go wrong. Tragically wrong.
Yeah, it really emphasizes that the margin for error in aviation, it's so small.
Absolutely. And this accident, which involved a helier near Miramar, really just highlights that a chain of what might seem like small errors or oversight can lead to a truly devastating outcome. So today, we're not just going to dissect what happened, but really try to understand the factors that contributed, and most importantly, the lessons we can all learn from this so we could all be safer pilots.
Absolutely. That's really the goal here, to learn and try to prevent similar accidents from happening in the future.
So let's set the scene. January 30th, 2002. Sunny California day. A Velocity aircraft with 2 pilots on board takes off. And less than an hour later, they're declaring a fuel emergency.
And you know, what's striking is this aircraft, it was equipped with a pretty sophisticated fuel totalizer system, something that could have given the pilots really precise fuel readings throughout their flight.
Right, so they had the technology. What went wrong then?
Well, that's the big question. And the NTSB report, it points to a pretty critical failure in pre-flight decision-making. The pilot chose to rely on a manual fuel check, and get this, he used an uncalibrated wooden stick.
Wait, hold on. A wooden stick?
Yeah, a wooden stick. You know, like something you might use to stir paint.
You're kidding. To check the fuel in an aircraft like that.
It's almost unbelievable. You've got this high-performance aircraft, and the pilot is checking the fuel with a stick.
It's hard to fathom. Did no one say anything?
Actually, the builder of the aircraft, they witnessed this, and they expressed their concern to the pilot.
Good. Someone was thinking straight.
But those concerns were dismissed. The pilot, he believed the flight was going to be short and that a manual check was good enough.
So, bit of overconfidence, maybe? Complacency?
Yeah, I think it's possible. And this is where the human factor in aviation really comes into play. Experience, it can sometimes lead to overconfidence, you know, underestimating the importance of those meticulous pre-flight checks.
Especially when it comes to something as crucial as fuel. I mean, that's not something you want to be guessing about.
Exactly. It's not a gamble you want to take.
So this is a case where technology alone couldn't prevent this accident, right? You need a pilot who is engaged, thinking critically, and using all the resources available to make sure the flight is safe.
Absolutely. And this case, it highlights that. About 45 minutes into the flight, the pilot declares an emergency. He reports fuel exhaustion to MCS Miramar Tower. Think about the pressure in that moment. You're up in the air, you realize you miscalculated, and now you're racing against time to try to find a safe place to land.
So what happened next?
Well, the tower controller, they did their best to guide the pilot. They even cleared him to land on a taxiway to give him the shortest possible route.
To try and make it.
But it wasn't enough. Tragically, the aircraft hit an embankment just 200 feet short of the runway.
And the fact that there was no post-impact fire, that really points to fuel exhaustion as the primary cause. I mean, it wasn't something else. It was just they ran out of fuel.
That's exactly right. And the NTSB investigation, it was incredibly thorough, and their findings were very clear. The probable cause was pilot error, specifically improper in-flight planning and decision-making that led to the fuel exhaustion and the loss of engine power.
And it wasn't just the pre-flight fuel check, right? The NTSB, they identified a number of contributing factors.
Right. They noted inadequate pre-flight fuel measurement methods, the failure to use those onboard fuel monitoring systems that were available to them, and even potential vision limitations of the pilot. So it was a chain of events.
A series of things that kind of all lined up.
Yeah, each link in that chain kind of contributed to this tragic outcome.
And speaking of the vision limitations, that part of the report really stood out to me. It mentioned that the pilot wasn't wearing his reading glasses. I mean, could he even see the instruments properly?
Yeah, that's a huge concern. You know, pilots rely on those instruments for absolutely critical information, especially in a complex aircraft like this one. if you can't see them clearly, it's almost like flying blind in a way.
It's a sobering thought. And it just reinforces that we as pilots, we're responsible for our own fitness to fly. And that includes not just our physical health, but also making sure we have the necessary tools, like those corrective lenses, to do our job safely.
Yeah, it's about being prepared and being in the right condition to fly, no matter what. It's a fundamental part of being a safe pilot, making sure you're physically and mentally prepared for every flight.
And this accident also brings up some interesting questions about the role of the second pilot who was also, certificated. Did they notice the pilot using that wooden stick? I mean, could they have said something,
That's where crew resource management or CRM really comes into play. It's about creating an environment in the cockpit where anyone can and should voice their concerns regardless of their experience level. It's that shared responsibility for safety.
So even if you're not the one flying the plane, you still have a critical role to play in ensuring a safe flight.
Everyone's eyes and ears are important.
What strikes me is that this accident, it wasn't just about one pilot's mistake. The NTSB report, it seems to point to a broader issue within general aviation, like a need for a stronger safety culture.
Right, exactly. It's not enough to just follow the rules and go through the motions. A true safety culture, it means being proactive, thinking critically about every aspect of the flight and always looking for ways to minimize those risks.
So what does that look like in practice? I mean, how do we create that kind of culture?
Well, for individual pilots, it starts with taking ownership of your own safety, being meticulous with your pre-flight planning, understanding your aircraft systems really, really well, inside and out, and recognizing your own limitations.
Knowing what you don't know.
Yeah, and I think it also extends to flight schools, maintenance organizations, the entire aviation community. Everyone needs to be on the same page when it comes to putting safety first.
Prioritizing safety above everything else.
Exactly. Creating an environment where open communication is encouraged, where continuous learning is valued, and where everyone feels comfortable speaking up if they see something that might be unsafe.
So it's not just about being afraid to point something out or question something.
Right. It's about creating that open and honest dialogue about safety.
Okay, so we've talked about the pilot's errors, the systemic issues, the importance of CRM, but what about the emergency response itself? I mean, once that fuel emergency was declared, could anything have been done differently to maybe change the outcome?
Well, the NTSB report does mention that while the pilot did communicate effectively with ATC, there may have been a missed opportunity to better manage the aircraft's glide performance in an attempt to reach the runway.
So even in those final moments, I mean, with the situation as dire as it was, there might have been a chance.
Potentially, yeah. It really comes down to training and preparation. Pilots need to be deeply familiar with emergency procedures and not just in theory, You need to practice those procedures. You need to build that muscle memory so that you can react almost instinctively under pressure.
And this is where simulator training can be so valuable. It lets you experience those high stress scenarios in a safe environment, practice your decision making.
Because when a real emergency happens, you don't have time to hesitate or second guess yourself. You need to know exactly what to do and do it without hesitation.
The report also touched on the possibility of maybe improved coordination with ATC to maybe identify alternative options during an emergency like this.
Right. That's a crucial point. In a fuel emergency, I mean, every second counts. Effective communication with ATC, exploring all those possible landing sites, having a clear plan of action, it can literally be the difference between a safe outcome and a tragedy.
So this accident, while deeply saddening, it really does serve as a stark reminder that safety in aviation is a shared responsibility. It's an ongoing process of learning, adapting, and constantly trying to minimize risks.
And it just reinforces how critical the human element is in aviation safety. We can have the most advanced technology in the world, but ultimately it's the pilot's judgment, their decision making, that determines the outcome of a flight.
That's a powerful insight, and it brings us back to that question we posed earlier. How can we as individuals and as a community build a safety culture that reduces human error and prioritizes smart decision-making in every phase of flight?
It's a question that's worth pondering, worth really thinking about. And as we continue to analyze this accident report, I think we're going to find even more valuable lessons that can help guide us toward that goal.
So we talk about this accident, what really kind of sticks out to me is that even with this really advanced fuel system on board this Velocity, the pilot chose to rely on that manual check with that uncalibrated stick. It's almost like he didn't trust the technology that was right there in front of him.
Yeah, it is strange, isn't it? And it makes you wonder about how we as pilots interact with all the technology in our aircraft. I mean, are we really using it to its full potential, or are we maybe falling back on old habits, maybe even cutting corners when it comes to those critical pre-flight checks?
It makes you think about your own pre-flight routine. Are you carefully going through each system, or are you just kind of going through the motions?
And that's the kind of self-reflection that I think this accident should really prompt in all of us. We need to be mindful, engaged, and always questioning our own assumptions and habits. Complacency, it can be a dangerous trap, especially when we're dealing with something as complex and potentially unforgiving as aviation.
Yeah, there's no room for complacency in the air.
Absolutely not.
The NTSB report also highlighted the importance of frequent inspections of fuel systems, particularly in experimental aircraft. And this particular Velocity, it had a pretty complex fuel system.
Yeah, it did. Dual pumps, gravity-fed tanks, a header tank.
Right, a lot going on there.
And that complexity just underscores the need for pilots to really truly understand their aircraft systems. It's not enough to just know how to operate them. You really need to know how they work, how they can fail, and what to do if something goes wrong.
So as the owner of an experimental aircraft, what can you do to make sure you have that level of understanding?
Well, it starts with the builder, right? They have a responsibility to provide thorough documentation and training to the owner, especially when it comes to complex systems like the fuel system. But as the pilot, you can't just passively receive that information. You need to actively engage, ask questions, and really dig deep to make sure you truly understand how everything works.
So it's a partnership then?
Yeah, I think it is.
The builder provides the knowledge, but it's up to the pilot to really take ownership of that knowledge and apply it.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the core of what we've been talking about today. Building a strong safety culture. It's not just about following checklists and regulations. It's about fostering a mindset of continuous learning, critical thinking, and that shared responsibility for safety.
We've covered a lot of ground today, dissecting this tragic accident, unpacking the NTSB's findings. But as we wrap up here, what's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember from all of this?
I think the biggest takeaway is that complacency can be deadly in aviation. No matter how much experience you have, no matter how advanced your aircraft is, you always have to approach each flight with meticulous attention to detail, a willingness to learn, and an unwavering commitment to safety every single time.
What steps can you take in your own aviation journey to contribute to a culture of safety that honors the memory of those lost and strives to prevent future tragedies? We hope this episode has been informative and thought-provoking. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.
Thanks for tuning in to Brasher Warning. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you never miss a flight with us. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment or review, and don't forget to share the podcast with your fellow aviation enthusiasts. Until next time, stay sharp, stay safe, and keep soaring.
American 1552, contact center 127.0.
1552, we're going to be Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. We have an engine failure. We're going to return to DFW.
1552, roger. And which runway do you need?
We'll take 18 right.
Roger, American 1552, turn right heading 020, descend and maintain 8,000.